So hi friends, so in the last videos we covered about how Java is database independent, how Java is the platform independent, what is the architecture of JDBC architecture. Up to that we covered, right? But in this, now I will explain what is JDBC API. Are you getting what is the JDBC API, sir? Sir, I want to develop a JDBC application. Then I require several classes and interfaces which can be used to develop JDBC based application. Correct, right? All these classes and interfaces is nothing but JDBC API, sir. Regarding JDBC API defines several classes and interfaces which can be used for database communication. That's all, sir. So what JDBC API? A group of classes and interfaces which can be used for database communication. Next, this JDBC API, who is going to use? Can I spell out, sir? Who is going to use these interfaces or who is going to use these classes, right? There are two persons who are going to use. One person is programmer, sir. Programmer can use these classes and interfaces present inside JDBC API to communicate with the database. Next, there is another person is also there. Who is that other person? Is driver software vendor. Regarding who is the other person, sir? Driver software vendor. Sir, this person is responsible to develop driver software. Correct or not? Sir, how this vendor is going to develop driver software? Most of the times database vendor only. How we will develop driver software? By implementing interfaces present inside JDBC API. Are you getting that? Okay. So JDBC API defines several classes and interfaces which can be used for database communication. A group of classes are something like driver manager, something like result set, next connection, statement. All these words are related to our JDBC application are available from where? JDBC API. So programmer can use this API to develop JDBC based application. Driver software vendor can use this JDBC API to develop driver software. Clear, right? Okay. Next, this JDBC API contains two packages, right? What is the first package? Is java.sql package. Regarding what is the first package, sir? Java.sql package. Can you please spell out what is the second one, sir? JavaX.sql package. Regarding java.sql package, javax.sql package, right? This java.sql package contain the basic classes and interfaces which can be used for database communications. Something like statement, something like connection, result set, driver manager. These things are available inside java.sql package. Java.sql package contain the most basic classes and interfaces which can be used for normal database communication, right? But Java X.sql, can you spell out what is the meaning of X? Java Java extension. Remember, these ones are a bit advanced. Java extension. X means what? Extra. Yeah, extension, right? So Java X.sql package contains more advanced classes and interfaces which can be used for database communication, right? Sir, something like connection pooling concept I want to implement. Sir, don't worry, I will explain in detail. Connection pooling separate concept is there. I want to implement connection pooling concept. Are you getting? I want to use row set instead of result set. I want to use row set. Then we should go forward Java X.sql package. Are you in a position to understand, right? So JDBC API defines how many packages, right? Two packages. What is the first one? Java.sql, javax.sql package. Java.sql package contain basic classes and interfaces which can be used for database communication. Javax.sql package defines several classes and interfaces, of course more advanced classes and interfaces which can be used for database communication. Clear, right? Okay. Sir, it's a bit advanced. This is the basic JDBC, advanced JDBC, right? Like you can consider. Even in the javax.sql package, there are several sub packages are available, sir. Sir, if you want javax.sql.rosette, are you getting? javax.sql.rosette. Rosette is one package, one sub package, right? Similarly, javax.sql.rosette.serial. Serialization purpose, right? Serialization. Next, javax.sql.rosette.py. Are you getting right? So rosette dot, sir, here rosette dot SPI is nothing but related to synchronization concept. Is it clear for all of you, right? Okay, make sure, sir, these are various packages we have inside JDBC API. Clear for all of you? So what is the JDBC API? JDBC API define several classes and interfaces which can be used for database communication. Point number 1. Second one, sir, who is going to use JDBC API? Programmer. We are using to develop JDBC based application. Who is the other person can use this JDBC API, sir? Database vendor to develop driver software. Sir, I want to develop driver software for my own database. Sir, by implementing interfaces of JDBC API, we have to develop, okay, this driver software. Clear, right? Next, JDBC API contain how many packages, right? 2 packages. What is the first one? Java.sql package. What is the second one? javax.sql package. What is the difference between java.sql, javax.sql, right? Java.sql package contain basic classes and interfaces which can be used for database communication. Something like statement, result set, prepared statement, connection. All these things are available inside java.sql package. So more advanced classes and interfaces are available inside javax.sql package. Something like rosette. I don't want to use this bloody result set because result set is not that much useful. Sir, I want scrollable. I want read updatable result set. Then happily we can go for what? Rosette concept. Next, I don't want to create connection on my own. I want to use connection pooling to improve performance, right? Further data source is required. That data source is available inside javax.sql package. But anyway, as of now, we are at very basic introduction. Just simply remember java.sql for normal basic JDBC programming, javax.sql for advanced JDBC programming. Clear for all of you, right? This is the brief information about JDBC API, right? So just let me summarize. Have a look once about this. Sir, JDBC API. 1 minute. Here just observe. JDBC API provides several classes and interfaces. Clear, right? Next, programmer can use these classes and interfaces to communicate with the database. Sir, I want to communicate with the database. Sir, being a programmer, I want to use. Then which classes and interfaces are required? Where those classes and interfaces are available inside JDBC API. Clear, right? Next, who is the responsible? Another person who can use. Driver software vendor can use JDBC API while developing driver software. Clear, right? Next, JDBC API contain how many packages, right? 2 packages, right? What is the first one, sir? Java.sql package. Second one, sir? javax.sql package. Sir, have you observed? Java.sql package, it contains basic classes and interfaces which can be used for database communication. Observe that. What is that? Basic classes and interfaces which can be used for database communication, right? But javax.sql package contains more advanced classes and interfaces, right? Observe, these are not basic, advanced classes and interfaces which can be used for database communication, right? Of course, sir, here in the java.sql package, what are various important interfaces, right? Driver, connection, statement, regarding statement, prepared statement, callable statement, result set, like this, right? Sir, very important question for the interview room. What is statement? How many statements are there in the JDBC? Observe that. Statement, prepared statement, callable statement, all these are interfaces present inside Java dot SQL package, right? So what are various classes? Driver manager is a class, date is one class, time is one class, time stamp is one class, types is also one class, right? To define JDBC types, so we can go for types class. This is the basic JDBC terminology, right? But what about Java X.SQL package? It contains several advanced classes and interfaces which can be used for database communication, right? Are you getting? So it contains multiple sub packages also. I hope you people, I covered already, right? Java X.SQL.rowset, Java X.SQL.rowset.serialization purpose, Java X.SQL.rowset.SPI synchronization purpose, right? Remember, multiple sub packages also available. Inside Java X.SQL package, what are various interfaces are available? What is the first one? Data source. Remember this one, which can be used for connection pooling concept. Remember. Next, row set, alternative to result set. Row set concept, alternative to result set, right? Okay, more advanced result set is the row set, right? Next, row set listener, connection event listener. Sir, there are several interfaces are there. Similarly, row set event, connection event, these are important classes, right? Clear? Any doubt about this terminology, right? Okay, that's all. Sir, if any person is asking, can you please explain JDBC API? Simple, sir. JDBC API contains two packages. What is the first one? Java.SQL package, Java X.SQL package. Java.SQL package contains basic classes and interfaces for database communication. Java X.SQL package contains more advanced classes and interfaces for database communication. That's all simple. At very top level, you have to remember up to this. Clear for all of you, right? Sir, up to this we covered about JDBC API. Sir, JDBC API contains how many packages, right? Two packages. What is the first one? Java.SQL, Java X.SQL package, right? Sir, I want to tell a small important good news for you. Sir, inside JDBC API, there are several interfaces are there. Driver is one interface. Connection, statement, prepared statement, result set, like there are multiple interfaces are there. Now, who is the responsible to provide implementation? Programmer is the responsible to provide implementation? No, sir. Remember this. It's a very happy news for us. We are not responsible to provide implementation. Who is the responsible to provide implementation? Okay, driver software vendor is the responsible to provide implementation, right? So, sir, most of the times, who is going to develop driver software? Database vendor only. That's why database vendor is the responsible to provide implementation classes for the JDBC API. This group of implementation classes is nothing but driver software. Remember this one, sir. Sir, JDBC API contains several interfaces, right? But all these interfaces, we are not responsible to provide implementation. Driver software vendor, database vendor is the responsible to provide implementation. This group of implementation classes is nothing but driver software. Sir, I'm repeatedly using one word, vendor. Have you ever, what is the vendor? Vendor means what? Sir, simple. Don't think too much. What is your vendor? Vendor means owner. Suppose, who is the vendor? Who developed that? That person is called vendor. Who is the vendor of Java? Who is the vendor of Java? Sun Microsystems. Are you getting that? Because Sun Microsystems developed Java language, right? That's why Sun Microsystems is the vendor of Java. But now it is with Oracle Corporation, right? Same way, who is the vendor of Oracle database? Oracle Corporation. Who is the vendor of DB2 database? Sir, IBM. Are you getting that? Vendor means who is the owner. Okay, who developed that? That organization is by default considered as what? Vendor. Remember this, because in our JDBC servlets, JSP, everywhere I will use third party vendor, okay, database vendor, servlet, okay, like Tomcat vendor, web server vendor, like. So, vendor means owner. Okay, clear. Now, JDBC API interfaces. So, database vendor is the responsible to provide implementation. That collection of implementation classes is by default considered as what? Driver software. Clear for all of you, right? Just have a look once, sir. I have one Java application is there, sir. I have one Java application is there. Sir, I want to communicate with the database. I want to communicate with the database, right? If you want to communicate with the database compulsory driver software must be required. Correct or not? Compulsory driver software is required. Are you getting? Java application can communicate with the driver software. Driver software can convert Java calls into database specific calls, database specific calls into Java calls, right? Sir, what is this driver software? Are you getting? What is this driver software? This driver software is nothing but collection of implementation classes of JDBC API. Remember this one. Inside JDBC API, several interfaces are there, right? So a collection of implementation classes of those interfaces is nothing but driver software. Don't think too much. What is the driver software? Means a group of classes, right? Which classes? The classes which implement various interfaces of JDBC API. Who is the responsible to provide implementation classes? Driver software vendor. Most of the times, who is the person? Database vendor is the responsible, right? I will ask, sir, I will make a call to Oracle people. Sir, I want to communicate with the Oracle database. Can you please provide Oracle driver software? Then immediately Oracle people will provide OJDBC 6.jar or OJDBC 7.jar. Jar means what? A group of classes only, right? So that jar file itself is nothing but driver software. Remember this one. Who provided, sir? Database vendor. How they developed the driver software? By implementing various interfaces of JDBC API. Clear for all of it? So what are various interfaces present inside JDBC API? Who is the responsible to provide implementation? We are not responsible to provide. Who is the responsible to provide implementation, sir? Database vendor or driver software vendor. Sir, for example, I have Oracle driver software is there. Have you observed, right? Oracle driver software is there. Can you spell out what is the meaning of this one? Oracle driver software I have. What is the meaning is? Oracle driver software is a collection of classes, a collection of implementation classes of JDBC API, which can be used to communicate with Oracle database. Everyone can able to understand, right? So all the interfaces present inside JDBC API, driver software vendor is the responsible to provide implementation. That the implementation group is nothing but that implementation classes collection is nothing but driver software. Clear, right? Any explanation is required? I hope you people can able to understand. Simple, sir. We are not responsible to provide implementation of JDBC API. That is the good news to the programmer. Who is the responsible, sir? My database vendor is going to take care. That group of collection of implementation classes is nothing but driver software. Clear? If you are getting the basic idea, just let me summarize whatever I covered so that you people can get much clarity, right? Have a look once, sir. Same terminology. Here, have you observed, right? Programmers are not responsible to provide implementation classes of JDBC API interfaces. Sir, we are not responsible. Programmers are not responsible to provide implementation classes, right? Sir, most of the times, database vendor. Have you observed, right? Who is developing? Who is the owner of database? That person is the responsible to provide implementation. Yeah, the part of driver software. Sir, now it's very clear. Every driver software is collection of classes implementing various interfaces of JDBC API, which can be used to communicate with a particular database. Very simple. Java application is there. Database is there. To communicate with the database, compulsory some concept is required. What is this concept, sir? Driver software. Okay? Driver software is implementation classes of JDBC API. Are you getting right? Okay? For example, driver software for Oracle means collection of implementation classes of JDBC API which can be used to communicate with Oracle database. Everyone can able to understand? Sir, what is the driver software for Oracle? A group of implementation classes of JDBC API which can be used to communicate with Oracle database. Clear for all of it? So, what is the driver software? Who is the responsible to provide implementation? Clear, right? Sir, up to this we covered what is a driver software. Driver software is a collection of implementation classes of JDBC API, a group of classes, right? So itself is the driver software. Sir, assume it is the driver software. It is the driver software which can be used to communicate with the database from Java application. Sir, this is Java application. It is the database. Assume that here a group of classes are there which is nothing but driver software, sir. It is going to communicate with the driver software. Driver software can communicate with the database, you know. Sir, in there, is it a single class or multiple classes? There are multiple classes are available. One class, okay, implementation class of driver interface. Another class, implementation class of statement interface. Another class, implementation class of result set. Are you getting? Sir, another class, implementation class of prepared statement. Next, another class, implementation class of row set. Are you getting, right? So, whatever interfaces are there, inside JDBC API, for all those interfaces, implementation classes are required. A group of implementation classes is nothing but driver software. Clear for all of it, okay? Now I have, among these classes, among these many classes, sir, there is one special class is there, sir, okay? Every driver software is identified with that special class which is nothing but driver class. Are you getting? Which is nothing but one driver class, right? Okay? Every driver software, sir, is identified with some special class which is nothing but one driver class. Best example for you, sir. In India currently, sir, which government is ruling government? I can use the word BJP government. Regarding currently in the 2017, which government is the ruling government? BJP government, right? Sir, can I use the word? It is Narendra Modi's government. Acceptable, no problem, because in the BJP government, who is the main person? Who is the Prime Minister? Narendra Modi. That's why I can use the word. It is the Modi's government. Acceptable, right? Sir, in Telangana, which government is ruling government? Sir, TRS. TRS is the ruling government. Can I use the word? It is the KCR's government. Acceptable, no problem, because KCR is the main person in that government, right? Everyone can able to understand. Same way, of course, in the BJP, there are multiple ministers are there, but which minister is the Prime Minister? Narendra Modi. I can use the word Modi's government like this. In the driver software, there are multiple classes are there, sir. There are thousand classes are there, assume. Among all, there is one class, a special class will be there. That special class is nothing but one driver class. Everyone can able to understand, right? That's why I can use the word, every driver software can be identified with a special class. That special class is nothing but one driver class. Clear for all of it, right? Sir, if you want just a small example, I can able to tell, sir. Do you know, sir, we are going to discuss anyway in the next session, so don't worry. There is one driver is there, type 1 driver, sir. There is one driver software is there, type 1 driver software. These are type 1 driver software provided by Sun Microsystems. Regarding who provided type 1 driver software, sir? Sun Microsystems, yeah, the part of JDK only. Okay, whenever we install Java, automatically type 1 driver software is going to come. Inbuilt driver software, sir, inside Java, either type 1 driver software provided by Sun Microsystems, right? These are driver software, also known as JDBC ODBC bridge driver. Okay, after completing our cinema, next topic is types of drivers only. There I will explain much, don't worry about, sir. So there is one driver software is there. What is the name of the driver software? Type 1 driver software provided by Sun Microsystems, yeah, the part of JDK, right? Now, in this driver software, compulsory there should be driver class must be there or not? Yes. What is the driver class? Okay, sun dot, observe that, sun dot JDBC dot ODBC dot sun dot JDBC dot ODBC dot JDBC ODBC driver. Are you getting? So this is the driver class name present inside type 1 driver software. Okay, remember that, sir. Every driver software can identify with some special class. That special class is nothing but one type 1. I mean that special class is called driver class. Okay, for the type 1 driver, what is the corresponding driver class name? Sun dot JDBC dot ODBC dot JDBC ODBC driver. Remember that. Of course, in the types of drivers I will explain, don't worry about that. Similarly, sir, do you know type 4 driver is there, sir, of Oracle. Type 4 driver of Oracle, which is also known as thin driver. Which is also known as what? Thin driver. Sir, don't worry, all these words are new to you because, sir, I didn't cover types of drivers, sir. So no problem, just a basic idea. Sir, thin driver software is there, sir, provided by Oracle Corporation to communicate with Oracle database. In this driver software, driver class name should be there or not? Yes. What is the corresponding driver class name? Is Oracle dot JDBC dot Oracle dot JDBC dot Oracle driver. Are you getting? Oracle dot JDBC dot Oracle driver is the driver software name. Are you getting that? Is the driver software name, driver class name present inside type 4 driver software or thin driver software, sir. Everyone can able to understand? So every driver software is a collection of classes, okay, which provides implementation of JDBC API. Sir, among these classes, so there is one special class is there. That special class is nothing but driver class. So every driver software identified with some special class. That special class is nothing but one driver class. Clear for all of you, right? Okay. Sir, for example, type 1 driver software corresponding driver class is sun.jdbc.odbc.jdbc driver. For type 4 driver class name is oracle.jdbc.oracle driver. Just observe the driver software is there, driver class is also there, right? Okay, this driver class is the implementation class of driver interface. Are you getting right? We have driver interface is there. For that implementation class is there. This implementation class is called what? Driver class. Similarly, sir, this is the implementation class of connection interface. Assume that this is the implementation class of statement interface. Are you getting? This is the implementation class of statement. This is the implementation class of result set interface. Are you getting? So this group of classes are nothing but what? Driver software. Is it clear for all of it? Okay, that's what you people should aware. What is the driver class? What is the driver software? Clear, right? Sir, just let me review whatever I covered, right? Have a look once. Just observe Java application. If a Java application wants to communicate with the database, driver software must be required. This driver software is a group of classes. This driver software is identified with some special class, which is nothing but driver class. Driver class is the implementation class of driver interface. Clear, right? Okay, just observe. Every driver software is identified with a special class, which is nothing but driver class. Next, it is the implementation class of java.sql.driver interface. Next, type 1 driver software provided by Sun Microsystems as the part of JDK, sir. So once we install JDK, automatically type 1 driver software is going to come. Okay, type 1 driver software corresponding driver class name is, can you spell out, sir? sun.jdbc.odbc.jdbc ODBC driver. Have you observed? sun.jdbc.odbc.jdbc ODBC driver. Do you know this is the package name? sun.jdbc.odbc. Sir, this is the package name. and this one is the class name. Remember this one is class name. What JDBC ODBC driver. Similarly, thin driver provided by Oracle Corporation, and the corresponding driver class name is Oracle.jdbc.Oracle driver. Everyone can able to understand, right? Okay, this is what you people should aware clearly, right? Okay, what is the driver software, what is the driver class? Okay, that's all. Sir, have you observed in our JDBC I am always using driver interface, driver class, driver software? Like what is driver nonsense? Are you getting that? Okay, so for what is the difference between driver interface, driver class, driver software? Sir, which is the part of which one, like I have to discuss. First you require to get some clarity, sir. But this type of stupid question no one is going to ask in the entire room. Don't worry about that. But just for our clarity purpose we have to discuss in detail, right? Sir, what in JDBC we have 3 words we require to use frequently, sir. First one, driver interface. Second one, driver class. What is the third one, sir? Driver software. Okay, remember. Sir, what is the meaning of that? Here I have Java application is there, sir. Are you getting? I have Java application is there. This Java application wants to communicate with database. Are you getting? Java application wants to communicate with database, right? Sir, if Java application wants to communicate with the database, which thing must be required? Driver software must be required. Remember this one, sir. What is this one? Driver software must be required. Okay, I covered already. Sir, what is the driver software? Driver software is a group of implementation classes of, okay, a group of implementation classes of interfaces present inside JDBC API. Sir, just observe, in JDBC API there is one package is there, java.sql. In that package there is one interface is there, driver. Are you getting? So first let me talk about driver interface, right? Okay, driver is an interface present inside java.sql package. Are you getting? In which package it is there, sir? Java.sql package. If you want to develop driver class, if you want to develop, then where the requirement specification is there, this driver interface contain requirement specification to develop driver class. That's why if you want to develop your driver class, compulsory we require to implement driver interface. Is it clear for all of it? Okay, sir, what is the driver interface? Driver interface present inside java.sql package, and it acts as requirement specification to develop driver class. So here just observe java.sql.driver. Sir, interface is there. Okay, this interface should be implemented by some Java class. Regarding that class is nothing but one driver class. So Oracle.jdbc.Oracle driver. Are you getting right? Oracle.jdbc.Oracle driver. It is the implementation class of java.sql.driver interface, right? So such a type of implementation classes group is nothing but driver software. Remember this one, sir. So driver class present inside driver software. Like a driver class, there are multiple implementation classes are available, right? Implementation class of statement interface, implementation class of connection interface, implementation class of result set interface. All those things are available where, sir? Inside driver software. So Java application can communicate with driver software, driver software can communicate with database, right? Everyone can able to understand. Okay, sir, first one, driver. Driver is an interface present inside java.sql package. This driver interface acts as requirement specification to develop driver class. Clear for all of you, right? Next, sir, what is the driver class? What is the driver class? Very simple, sir. It is the implementation class of java.sql package. Next, this implementation class, do you know it is the implementation class of java.sql package, right? It is the main important implementation class present inside driver software. Remember this one, sir. Next, last concept, what is driver software? Just now we covered multiple times, right? Driver software is a group of implementation classes of JDBC API. Regarding that, all implementation classes group itself is nothing but by default considered as driver software. Can you please tell what is the role of driver software, sir? To convert Java calls into database specific calls, database specific calls into Java calls. That's why driver software acts as bridge between Java application and the database, right? Clear for all of it? So don't think too much. What is driver interface, driver class, driver software? Just let me summarize whatever we covered, sir. But in general, in JDBC, I'm always using this type of terminology, sir. Okay, now have a look once. Sir, difference between driver interface, driver class, and then driver software. Sir, driver interface. This interface present inside java.sql package. It acts as a requirement specification to develop driver class. Remember, if you want to develop driver class, then where the requirement specification is there, driver interface, right? Driver interface acts as requirement specification to develop driver class. Clear for all of it? Okay. Next one, sir, driver class. It is the implementation class of driver interface. Okay, it is the main class present inside driver software, sir. Sir, if you want an example for the driver class, best example for type 1 driver software, the corresponding driver class name is sun.jdbc.odbc.jdbc driver. Okay, if you want type 4 driver, okay, oracle.jdbc.oracle driver. Clear, right? Okay. Next, what is a driver software? Okay, it is the collection of implementation classes of various interfaces present in JDBC API. Sir, in the JDBC API, various interfaces are there. I want to implement a group of implementation classes of interfaces present inside JDBC API is nothing but what? Driver software. It is the responsible to convert Java calls into database specific calls and database specific calls into Java calls. So Java to database, database to Java. If you want to convert, who is going to take care, sir? Driver software. Next, it acts as a bridge between Java application and the database. Remember this one, sir. So that's why make sure very common words are driver class is the implementation class of driver interface. Driver class present inside driver software. Clear? So it is the implementation class of driver interface. This driver class present inside driver software. Driver software contain multiple classes. In that one class is nothing but driver class. Clear, right? Sir, now it's very clear what is the driver interface, what is the driver class, and what is the driver software. Sir, now usually driver softwares are available in the form of jar files. Have you observed, right? What is driver software, sir? Just we covered, okay, multiple times. A group of classes, a group of implementation classes of JDBC API. Sir, usually in our software environment, a group of classes we can represent by using jar file. Regarding jar file contains a group of dot class files. Remember this one, sir, Java archive file. Okay, Java archive file contain a group of dot class files. It is a compressed file which contain a group of dot class files, right? That's why usually driver software is available in the form of jar file. Remember this. Sir, my requirement is I want to communicate with Oracle database. Then I will ask, hey, Oracle people, can you please provide, sir, your driver software? Then immediately Oracle people are going to provide OJDBC6.jar. Regarding JDBC 6.jar. If you want to communicate with Oracle 11G, are you getting? If you want to communicate with Oracle 11G, then we require to use which one, sir? JDBC 6.jar. This is the driver software, right? Sir, I want to connect with Oracle 12C, sir. With Oracle 12C. Sir, I want to communicate with Oracle 12C. Can you please provide driver software? Then immediately OJDBC 7.jar. This is the driver software. Sir, I want to communicate with Oracle 10G, sir. If you want to communicate with Oracle 10G, then we should go for OJDBC 14.jar. Remember this one. Sir, all these things are driver softwares. So, usually driver software is available in the form of one jar file. Remember. Sir, I want to communicate with MySQL database. Hey, can you please provide driver for MySQL database? If I can ask MySQL people, then they will provide MySQL connector dot jar file. Regarding MySQL connector dot jar file, this is the driver software to communicate with MySQL database. Clear for all of you? So in real time, all the driver softwares are available in the form of jar file. Remember this one, sir. OJDBC 6.jar or OJDBC 7.jar or MySQL connector dot jar file. Clear for all of you, right? Okay, that's all. Next, here one point is there, sir. Very, very important point. Who is the responsible to provide these driver softwares, right? Sir, who is the responsible to provide these driver softwares? Very common, sir. There are multiple people are responsible to provide these driver softwares. Sir, in Java environment or in database, usually 3 types of people will provide. 3 vendors can provide my driver softwares. One person is Java vendor, a bit rare. Okay, Java vendor will provide driver software. That driver software is type 1 driver software. Regarding that, which ones are type 1 driver software, but almost deprecated, sir. Java 1.8 version onwards, driver software is not available. Remember, this driver software is available until Java 1.7 only. So type 1 driver software is going to come at the part of Java, inbuilt part of JDK, right? But this facility is available until 1.7 version only. Remember, so Java vendor may provide driver software, but this was the history once upon a time, but not now. So second one, database vendor. Regarding database vendor can provide driver softwares, just how I told, OJDBC 6.jar, OJDBC 7.jar, next MySQL connector.jar, these jar files provided by database vendor only. Remember this one, sir. Best example, thin driver is the type 4 driver, sir, which is provided by Oracle people. Remember this one. Thin driver is the software provided by Oracle people. So OJDBC 6.jar is nothing but thin driver. Next, sometimes a bit rare. Okay, third party vendors also will provide driver softwares, right? Then immediately you ask, sir, what is the third party vendor? I will discuss. But as of now, just observe. Driver software usually available in the form of jar files. Next, who is the responsible to provide driver softwares, right? 3 types of vendors: Java vendor, database vendor, third party vendor. Can you give an example for the driver software provided by Java vendor? Type 1 driver. Can you give an example provided by database vendor? Thin driver. Can you give an example provided by third party vendor? Yes, remember that. Sir, iNet. What is that, sir? Can you spell out? iNet is a software company. Okay, sir, third party software company providing several driver softwares for various databases, right? Remember this one. Sir, best example, iNet Oraxo. Regarding what is this one, sir? iNet Oraxo for Oracle database. Sir, if you want to communicate with Oracle database from Java application, I will ask iNet software company, then they will provide iNet Oracle driver software, okay, for Oracle database. Next, iNet Merlia. Are you getting that? What is this one, sir? iNet Merlia for Microsoft SQL Server. Microsoft SQL Server. If you want to communicate with Microsoft SQL Server database, then iNet Merlia. This is the driver software provided by iNet software company, sir. Next, iNet Cyblux. Are you getting that? iNet Cyblux, Lux Papa, something like iNet Cyblux provided by iNet for can you please guess, right? Cyblux for which database? Cyblux for which database? Sybase. Are you getting for which database, right? Sybase. Remember, that's why. So what is a driver software? A group of collection of classes, implementation classes of JDBC API. Next, a driver software is available in the form of jar file. Driver software provided by multiple vendors. Java vendor, next a database vendor, and the third party vendor. Java vendor is the, can you give an example for Java vendor provided driver software? Type on driver software. Next, a database vendor provided driver software, thin driver. Regarding third party vendor driver, with third party vendor provided driver software, iNet Oracle, iNet Merlia, iNet Cyblux. These are various driver softwares to communicate with various databases. Clear for all of you, right? Just let me provide, sir, let me review once again. Have a look once, sir. Sir, usually driver softwares are available in the form of jar file. OJDBC 6.jar, OJDBC 7.jar, 14.jar, MySQL connector.jar. These are various driver softwares, a group of collection of classes, right? Next, driver software can be provided by the following vendors: Java vendor, database vendor, third party vendor. Sir, example, type 1 driver, which is also known as JDBC ODBC bridge driver. Sir, after this, next topic is types of drivers only. There I will explain much. JDBC ODBC bridge driver, also known as type 1 driver, provided by Java vendor. Next, a thin driver provided by Oracle database vendor. Remember. Next, iNet is a third party vendor providing driver softwares for various databases. Can you observe that? iNet Oracle for Oracle database, iNet Merlia for Microsoft SQL Server, iNet Cyblux for Sybase database, right? Everyone can able to understand. So, how many who are providing driver softwares, right? Sir, multiple people, Java vendor, database vendor, and third party vendor. But anyway, among all, which vendor provided driver softwares are recommended to use? Remember that highly recommended to use database vendor provided driver softwares. More compatibility with the database will be there, sir. That's why. So if database vendor unable to provide, then only we require to think about, sir, third party vendor. Highly recommended to use database vendor provided driver softwares. Clear for all of it? Note I specified. It is highly recommended to use database vendor provided driver softwares. Clear for all of it? Okay, that's all, sir. Sir, just we covered about what is driver software. Who is the responsible to develop driver software? Sometimes Java vendor, database vendor, third party vendors, right? Sir, but most of the times recommended to use what? Database vendor provided driver software. Next, while developing driver softwares, vendors may use only Java. The total driver software can be developed only by using Java. Sometimes Java with other languages also. Are you getting? Sir, I want to develop a driver software. Okay? I want to develop a driver software. To develop driver software, I can use only Java or Java plus other languages also, like C or C++, right? Okay? If I use only Java, total driver software developed only Java, such type of drivers are called pure Java drivers. Remember this one, sir. Pure Java drivers. So this driver, complete driver software developed only by using Java. Such type of driver softwares are called what? Pure Java drivers, right? Okay. Sometimes I can use Java with some other languages like C or C++. Such type of driver softwares are called partial. Are you getting partial Java drivers? Remember this one. So pure Java drivers are there, partial Java drivers are there. Okay, in the next somewhere, while talking types of drivers, these words we are going to use repeatedly, sir. If I use anywhere pure Java driver, full Java driver, what is the meaning of that, sir? The total driver software is developed by using only Java language. Sir, if I use partial Java driver, Java with other languages are used to develop driver software. Clear for all of it? Okay, just have a look once, sir. So while developing driver software, vendors may use only Java or Java with other languages like C or C++, right? Sir, if driver software is developed only in Java language, then such type of drivers are called pure Java drivers. Are you getting that? So if the driver software developed only in Java, completely in Java, such type of driver softwares are called pure Java drivers. Next, if a driver software is developed with Java and other languages, then such type of driver softwares are called partial Java drivers. Are you getting that? So total, how many types of drivers are there? It may be pure Java driver or it may be partial Java driver, right? Okay, that's all. This is what you people should aware, right? Are you in a position to understand, right? What is JDBC API? In that, how many packages are available? Next, what is a driver software? Next, who is the responsible to provide implementation for the driver software? What is the difference between driver interface, a driver class and a driver software? Next, what is about pure Java driver? What is the partial Java driver? Clear for all of you, right? This is what JDBC API. Okay. Sir, now I will explain the next driver, whatever we have. The last drivers are type 4 driver. Sir, we covered type 1, type 2, sir, 2 worst drivers. Next, type 3 driver I covered, which is the most commonly used driver. The next powerful driver is the type 4 driver, sir. Okay, what architecture, what is the functionality, what are various advantages and limitations I will discuss. Sir, clear, right? So what is the topic we are going to discuss? Type 4 driver. Now listen, what is the architecture of type 4 driver, sir? Very simple. Here observe, this is my Java application. Are you getting? Itself is Java application. Sir, internally it uses JDBC. I want to communicate with the database. Are you getting? I want to communicate with the database, right? Have you remembered in the case of type 1, okay, sir, this driver internally uses ODBC driver. In the case of type 2, driver internally uses native libraries. If it is the type 3 driver, internally uses middleware server. But the biggest advantage of type 4 driver is it won't require any component. Directly it will communicate with the database. Remember that. So it is one type 4 driver. Okay, type 4 driver. Sir, it is directly communicate with the database. Okay, the results it will provide to Java application. Remember this one. Type 4 driver can communicate directly with the database by using database specific native protocol. Are you getting it? What is that protocol, sir? Native protocol provided by database vendor. It will communicate directly with the database without having any extra component. Remember. So type 4 driver converts JDBC calls into database specific calls directly. Remember, it is converted JDBC calls into database specific calls directly. Okay, sir, next here the biggest the point here is, take a bit special care. This driver is also known as pure Java driver. Are you getting right? What is this driver, sir? Pure Java driver. Because this driver is completely developed in Java only. Are you getting that? Completely Java. So that's why it is a pure Java driver. This driver is also known as native protocol driver. Native protocol driver. Why the word native protocol driver is internally it is going to use database vendor provided native protocol to communicate with the database. Next, this driver also known as thin driver. This driver also known as thin driver. Then immediately we ask what is the why the word thin? What is the meaning of thin, sir? Thin means light weighted. Are you getting? Thick means what? Heavy weighted. Are you getting? Fat. Heavy weighted is by default considered thick, but this one is the thin. Because type 4 driver won't require any extra component to communicate with the database. Directly it can communicate with the database. That's why this type 4 driver is also known as what? Thin driver. Everyone can able to understand, right? Sir, what is the diagram? Sir, this is the Java application on type 4 driver. This total thing is nothing but client mission. Okay, this type 4 driver converts JDBC calls into database specific calls. Next and after that, this driver is completely developed in Java. If it is purely developed in Java, is it platform independent driver or platform dependent driver, sir? Platform independent driver. Remember this one because it can communicate, because it is purely developed in Java. That's why on any platform type 4 driver is going to work and it's going to provide same results. So that's why it is the platform independent driver. Why it is the native protocol driver? Internally it is communicate with the database by using native protocol provided by database vendor. Next, why this one is the thin driver? Without having any other extra component, this driver can communicate directly with the database. That's why this driver is also known as what? Thin driver. Clear for all of it? Sir, now what are various advantages, right? Here I have observed how many conversions are required? Only one level conversion. But if you go for, sir, all the remaining, sir, type 1, 2 conversions. Type 2, 1 conversion only. But the problem is database dependent, platform dependent, sir. Type 3, 2 conversions are required. But type 4, 1 conversion is enough. That's why relatively performance wise too good, sir. Okay, it is the speediest driver we can use. The second advantage, platform independent driver, right? Sir, if any person is asking what are various advantages of type 4 driver, what is the first advantage, sir? Here, how many levels of conversion is required? Only one level. JDBC calls into database specific calls. That's why performance is, what is this one, sir? Performance is high. Performance is high because how many conversions are required? Only one level conversion. Type 4 driver can communicate directly with the database without having any further internal conversions. That's why performance is high. Second advantage, it is a platform independent driver. It is a platform independent driver, sir. Sir, you can use any platform, maybe Linux or Windows or Sun Solaris or Mac, any platform. The driver is always the same. Remember that. Next, what is the third advantage? We are not required to have ODBC driver. We are not required to have ODBC driver. We are not required to have native libraries like type 2 driver. Okay, we are not required to have middleware server like type 3 driver, right? Sir, native libraries are not required. Middleware server is not required. ODBC driver is not required. That's why it is also known as thin driver, right? These are the various advantages, right? But what is the limitations, sir? Limitation. Sir, even these many advantages are there, only a small minor limitation is there. I hope by this time you can able to guess. Sir, this driver communicate directly with the database or not? Yes, that's why it is the database dependent driver. Are you getting right? It is the database dependent driver. That is the only limitation of type 4 driver. It is a database dependent driver. Are you able to understand, right? What is this? What is the limitation of type 4 driver, sir? Okay, it is the database dependent driver. That's why even this limitation is there. No problem. N number of advantages are there. That's why the most commonly used driver in our applications is type 4 driver only. All our JDBC programs, most of the times I'm always going to use type 4 driver only. Remember that. Sir, if you are going to use only one database, I have to use in my project, I'm going to use only one database, then happily you can go for type 4 driver because we will get these many advantages, right? Clear for all of you, right? Sir, what is the type 4 driver? What is the type 4 driver? Next, what is the functionality? Sir, next, what are various other words? Why this driver considered as pure Java driver, native protocol driver or thin driver? What are various advantages, limitations, right? This driver converts data JDBC calls into database specific calls directly. The biggest advantage, performance is going to be improved because only one level conversion is required. Next, it is completely implemented in Java. That's why it is the platform independent driver. Next, ODBC driver or middleware server or native libraries are not required. That's why it is the thin driver. The biggest limitation of this driver is it is the database dependent driver. Clear for all of you, right? So, what are various advantages of this driver? You people, limitation, what is the architecture? You should have clear clarity, right? Okay. Sir, now it is very clear what is type 4 driver, what is the functionality, what is the architecture, what are various advantages and limitations. So let me summarize all the things in our notes style so that you will get much clarity. Sir, have a look once, sir. This is architecture of type 4 driver, right? Java application communicates with the type 4 driver. Type 4 driver communicates directly with the database. Regarding type 4 driver converts JDBC calls into database specific calls directly. Are you getting that? Okay. Sir, now this is it won't require ODBC driver, it won't require native libraries, it won't require any middleware server. Remember that, okay? Now just observe. It is also known as pure Java driver. Okay, because it is completely developed in Java or all Java native protocol driver, because internally it uses database vendor provided native protocol. Next, are thin driver, because this driver won't require any extra component like ODBC driver to communicate with database. That's why it is also known as what? Thin driver. Next, this driver uses database specific native protocols to communicate with the database. Regarding database vendor provided native protocols to communicate with the database, internally this driver is going to use. Next, this driver converts JDBC calls into database specific calls directly. Correct, obviously, because only one level conversion, right? This driver developed only in Java and hence it is also known as pure Java driver. Because of this, the biggest advantage is it is platform independent driver. You can use any platform, sir. This driver is always fixed. Remember this. Next, this driver won't require any ODBC driver or native libraries at the client side, and hence it is called thin driver. Remember, it is also known as what? Thin driver, right? Clear for all of it, okay? These are various general points related type 4 driver, sir. Very simple. Type 4 driver, okay, converts JDBC calls into database specific calls directly. It is the platform independent driver, but it is the database dependent driver because it is communicating directly with the database, right? Next, advantages, right? The first biggest advantage here is it is a platform independent driver. Correct or not? Next, this driver won't require ODBC driver or native libraries or middleware server. It is not going to require anything, sir. Next, it uses database vendor specific native protocol to communicate with the database, and hence security is more. Are you getting? Next, one more advantage, performance wise, this driver is too good. Performance is more. Are you getting? Performance is more. Why? Because how many levels of conversion is required? Only one level conversion is required, right? Next, what are various limitations, right? The only limitation of this driver is it is a database dependent driver because it is communicating with the database directly, right? That's all. So, what are various advantages? What are various limitations, like? Sir, because of all these advantages, even though the small limitation is there, but most commonly used driver in our applications is type 4 driver only. Remember that. Okay, can you give an example for type 4 driver, sir? If I can ask Oracle people, hey Oracle, I want to communicate with the Oracle database, can you please provide type 4 driver? Then immediately Oracle people provided type 4 driver is called thin driver. Remember this one, Oracle people provided which driver, sir? Thin driver. If I can ask MySQL people, hey MySQL, can you please provide type 4 driver? Immediately they will provide connector/j. This is a type 4 driver provided by MySQL people. Clear for all of it? This is about a small summary related to type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. Are you able to understand that? Okay, that's all, sir. We covered about type 1. What is the functionality? What are the advantages, limitations of type 1? Now let me talk type 2 driver, type 1 driver. Almost the same, sir. If you know the basic functionality of one driver, then understanding remaining drivers is not that much difficult. Remember that. Only, sir, type 2 driver exactly same as type 1. Okay? Except a small differences, right? What is that? Here see, have you remembered type 1 driver? In the case of type 1 driver, we have Java application. Have you remembered? Can you spell out? We have Java application, which is nothing but JDBC internally. Next, Java application communicates with type 1 driver. Java application communicates with type 1. Type 1 driver internally communicates with ODBC driver. ODBC driver internally communicates with the database. Have you remembered, right? This is the architecture of type 1 driver. Okay, just observe that carefully, sir. So Java application communicates with the type 1 driver. Type 1 driver communicates with the ODBC driver. ODBC driver communicates with the database. You know this part already we discussed, right? But now my next concept is type 2 driver. Type 2 driver exactly same as type 1 driver, except the ODBC part is replaced with the vendor provided native libraries. Are you getting that? What is that one? Database vendor provided native libraries. That part the ODBC replaced with the native libraries, right? Sir, let me redraw once again this diagram, sir. Here, this is my Java application. This is the Java application. Next, internally it will use a JDBC. Okay, sir, this Java application communicates with the type 2 driver, right? Okay, type 2. Sir, here on the client machine we require to install. Okay, this is the very important. ODBC part replaced with what? Vendor provided database specific native libraries. Are you getting? Database specific native libraries. And then we have databases there, sir. Take very special care, sir. How the functionality is going to be happen? Java application communicates with the type 2 driver. Type 2 driver converts JDBC calls into database specific native library calls. These calls can be understandable directly by database. Remember this one, sir. So type 2 driver functionality converts database specific JDBC calls into database specific native library calls. These native library calls can be understandable directly by database. Is it clear for all of it? So, sir, type 2 driver converts into database specific native library calls which can be understandable by database, right? Sir, this is the architecture of type 2 driver. Make sure, sir. So it is exactly same as type 1 except ODBC part we have to replace with what? Vendor provided database specific native libraries. Clear, right? Sir, that's why, do you know this driver is also known as partly Java native API driver. Are you getting this driver is also known as partly Java native API driver because we are using native libraries which are provided by database vendor. That's why native API partly Java driver. It's not completely developed in Java. Java with the native languages, right? Then immediately you may ask, sir, what is the native language or what are the native libraries? The libraries which are developed in non-Java, mostly C or C++. Are you getting that? Libraries which are developed in non-Java, mostly C or C++, right? Such type of libraries are called native libraries. Clear for all of you, right? Who is the responsible to provide native libraries? Database vendor is the responsible to provide native libraries. On the client mission, we require to install these native libraries, right? Sir, this total part itself is client mission. Remember this. Are you getting? That's all. So it's a very clear what is the architecture diagram of type 2 driver. Type 2 driver is exactly same as type 1 driver, except that ODBC part we have to replace with what? Vendor provided native library calls. Next, type 2 driver converts JDBC calls into database specific native library calls. These calls can be understandable directly by database engine. Clear for all of you, right? Of course, database software can able to understand these database specific native library calls. Okay, what are native libraries? The libraries are functions which are developed in non-Java, mostly C or C++. These things are by default considered as native libraries, right? Up to this is the clear. Now, what are various advantages are there for this type 2 driver, right? Sir, let me talk about advantages. Just take a bit very special care, sir. What is the first biggest advantage? How many conversions are required? In the type 1, how many conversions are required? Sir, JDBC to ODBC. ODBC to database specific. How many conversions? 2 conversions are required. But here, how many conversions are required? Sir, JDBC to database specific native library calls. These things can be understandable by database. That's why, sir, when compared with the type 1 driver, this driver is relatively performance wise good, sir. It is a speed driver when compared with type 1 driver. Regarding performance wise, it's good. Okay, first one. Second one, sir, ODBC driver is required or not required? For the type 2, no ODBC driver requirement. ODBC driver not required, right? No ODBC support. It is not required to have ODBC. Next, another advantage is also there, sir, when compared with the type 1 especially. What is the biggest advantage here is, listen very, very carefully, sir. Type 1 internally uses what? ODBC. ODBC, sir, will work only for what? Windows machines. So it is the platform dependent driver. Compulsory it will work only for Windows. But type 2 driver, even it is the platform dependent. It is also platform dependent because internally it uses what? Native library, C or C++ are platform dependent languages only. But I can use a type 2 for Windows. I can use separate type 2 for Linux. I can use separate type 2 for Sun Solaris. Sir, only difference is, of course, that corresponding native libraries I will use. That's why this type 2 driver not reserved only for Windows machines. If you want, you can take separate type 2 for Linux, separate type 2 for Sun Solaris like. Okay, so when compared with the type 1, portability is more. Sir, don't get confused, sir. It is platform dependent driver only, but make sure, sir, if you want to communicate with Linux, separate type 2 driver is there. If you want to communicate with Windows, separate type 2 driver is there. So type 2 driver can work for Windows, can work for Linux, can work for Sun Solaris, but type 1 driver can work only for Windows machines. That's why when compared with the type 1 driver, type 2 driver portability is more. Remember this one. Are you getting? So up to this, what are various advantages, right? When compared with the type 1, relatively faster driver, speed driver. Next, ODBC drivers are not required for type 2. Next, and after that, relatively portability is more. Okay, that's all. These are the advantages, right? Sir, what are various limitations are there? What are various limitations are there, sir? Sir, the two worst limitations are there for the type 2 driver, right? What those are things? Listen carefully, sir. Among all 4 drivers, there is one biggest drawback is there for type 2 driver. What is that drawback is? Type 2 driver is database dependent driver, platform dependent driver also. Regarding that, it is both the database dependent, both platform dependent, sir. Very simple. Type 2 driver internally communicated with the native libraries, which are provided by database vendor. So it is communicating directly with the database specific libraries. That's why this driver is database dependent driver. Okay, sir, today I am using Oracle. Tomorrow if I want to use MySQL, compulsory you have to change your driver, sir. Sir, today I am using Oracle. Tomorrow I want to use DB2. Compulsory you require to change the driver. Sir, it is not a database independent driver. It is the database dependent driver. That's why migrating from one database to another database will become very, very difficult. So the first limitation is database dependent driver. Okay. Second limitation, sir. Have you observed? It is not implemented completely in Java. That's why I can use the word partly Java native API driver. Sir, it is the platform dependent driver. For Windows, one type 2 driver I have to use. For Linux, another type 2 driver I have to use. For Sun Solaris, one more type 2 driver I require to use. That is, it is the platform dependent driver. If you change the platform, automatically this type 2 driver software won't work. We have to go for new type 2 driver software. So it is a platform dependent driver. Are you getting right? Out of all 4 drivers, only one driver which is database dependent and which is platform dependent is the type 2 driver only. Such type of worst driver is type 2 driver, right? Everyone can able to understand. But here one small, let me explain a small layman example, sir. I have one car is there. I want a driver to drive this car. Assume that. Okay, I have to, long journey is there for me. So self-drive I may not prefer. That's why I want to go for one driver. Then I call one person. Sir, is the driver available or not? Yes, why not? So I will come like. Driver came, sir. Driver came, car started. Sir, at daytime we started the car. Assume. Night time, whenever dark is coming, immediately this driver stopped the car. Sir, I can able to drive only in the daytime. Night time I can't drive. Oh, then I made a call to another person. Then I asked that person to drive in the night time. So for daytime one driver is required. For night time one driver is required. Next and after that, in the night, suddenly rain is coming. Suddenly rain is coming. Then this driver is telling, in the rain I can't drive. In the rain I can't drive. Warning. In the rain, so another driver I have to ask. So who can able to drive in the rain? Next, sir, suddenly the driver stopped the car. Sir, in the city roads only I can able to travel. I can able to drive. On the highway I can't. Have you observed, right? So for a highway, one driver. For city roads, one driver. For village, one driver. For daytime, one driver. For next and after that, rain, another driver. For night time, another driver. How many drivers we require to maintain, man? Is it a problem or not? Same such type of worst situation is there for this type 2 driver also. Because, sir, Windows, one driver. For Oracle, another driver. For Linux, another driver. Sun Solaris, another driver. For MySQL, one driver. If you change the platform, you have to change the driver. If you change a database, you require to change the driver. Such a type of worst driver is nothing but one type 2 driver. Never recommended to use this bloody driver. Remember this. The platform dependent driver. If you change a platform, you have to change your driver software. It is the database dependent driver. If you change a database, you require to change this driver software, right? Is it a problem or not? Yes. Sir, next and after that, one more problem, sir. Here, who is the responsible to provide vendor provided, this database specific native libraries, right? Database vendor. There is no guarantee every database vendor will provide native libraries, right? I will ask, hello Oracle, I want to communicate with the Oracle database. Can you please provide native libraries? Native libraries, like immediately Oracle people are going to tell Durga, we can able to provide. I can ask the same question to the MySQL people. Array MySQL people, can you please provide? Simple MySQL people are telling, sorry boss, we are not having any native libraries. Are you getting? So there is no guarantee that if a database vendor provide native libraries. Remember, Oracle people can provide such type of libraries are called OCI libraries. Sir, who is the responsible to provide? Oracle people are providing OCI. Okay, OCI libraries, Oracle call interface. Remember this one, OCI libraries, right? MySQL people, they want to provide any libraries. That's why Type 2 driver support is available for Oracle but not for MySQL database. Clear, right? So these are the limitations, right? So no guarantee that database vendor provide libraries, native libraries. Database vendor provide native libraries, right? Native libraries. Are you in a position to understand, right? That's all. This is about, okay, what is the architecture of type 2 driver? What is the other name for type 2 driver? So type 2 driver is exactly same as type 1 driver architecture, except that ODBC part replaced with what? Vendor provided native libraries. Okay, it is a type 2 driver converting JDBC calls into database specific native library calls. Native library calls means what? Are C or C++ functions, the functions which are implemented in non-Java. Who is the responsible to provide this? Database vendor is the responsible to provide these things, right? Clear? So to convert, type 2 driver converts JDBC calls into database specific native library calls which can be understandable by database. Okay, that's all. This is about type 2 driver. Next, what are various advantages? Relatively speed is more when compared with the type 1 driver because one level conversion is required. Next, and after that ODBC drivers are no longer required. Next, when compared with the type 1 driver, portability relatively more. Next, limitations, right? The biggest, worst limitations of this driver is it is a database dependent and a platform dependent driver. If you change a database, you require to change the driver software. If you change a platform, you require to change the driver software, right? Remember, next, there is no every database vendor can provide support, can provide this driver or corresponding native libraries, right? Oracle people provided type 2 driver, but MySQL people not provided type 2 driver. Remember, that's why, sir, these type 2 driver also not recommended to use. Everyone can able to understand. This is the functionality, advantages, limitations of type 2 driver, right? Sir, up to this, I covered about type 2 driver. What is the functionality, what is the architecture, what are various advantages and limitations. Let me summarize all these things so that people will get a bit clarity. Have a look one, sir. Sir, this is the architecture of type 2 driver, sir. Java application, type 2 driver, vendor, database vendor specific native libraries, and then database. Here, Java application communicates with the type 2 driver. Type 2 driver converts JDBC calls into vendor specific native library calls. These calls can be understandable by database engine. Are you getting? So now observe, it is also known as native API, partly Java driver. Native API because this driver internally uses native libraries. That's why native API, partly Java driver. Next, type 2 driver is exactly same as type 1 driver, except that ODBC part is replaced with database vendor specific native libraries. Obviously, in the case of type 1, here ODBC part is there. That ODBC part we replace with database vendor specific native libraries. Next, what is the meaning of native libraries, sir? Just now I told native libraries means the set of functions written in non-Java, developed in non-Java. That is called mostly either C or C++. Such type of functions are called what? Native functions. Okay, native libraries, right? Sir, we have to install vendor provided native libraries on the client machine. Obviously on the client machine, yes, these native libraries we require to install. Can you please observe? Type 2 driver converts JDBC calls into vendor specific native library calls which can be understandable directly by database engine. Is it clear for all of it? So it will be the type 2 driver converts Java calls into database vendor specific calls which can be understandable by database engine. Sir, that's all. This is the functionality. What is the architecture? Internally it depends on native libraries. Why this driver is also known as native API partly Java driver? Because it's not fully developed in Java, partly Java driver. Internally it uses native libraries. So that's why native API driver, right? Clear up to this? Next, what are various advantages? Sir, when compared with the type 1 driver, here have you observed? When compared with the type 1 driver, performance is high because it required only one level conversion from JDBC to native library calls. Have you remembered? If it is the type 1 driver, Java JDBC to ODBC, ODBC to database specific. But in the case of type 2 driver, JDBC calls into database specific native library calls. One level conversion is enough. That's why performance is more. Next, in the type 2, no need of arranging this bloody ODBC driver, not required. Next, when compared with the type 1 driver, portability is more because type 1 driver applicable only for Windows machines, but type 2 drivers are available for Linux machine, for Sun Solaris and so on. That's why when compared with the type 1, okay, type 2 driver, portability is more. These are the advantages, right? But what are various limitations are there, sir? Obviously, what limitations are there? It is database dependent driver because sir, type 2 driver communicating directly with the database specific native libraries. That's why it is the database dependent driver. Migrating from one database to another database is very difficult, sir. Today I am using Oracle. Sir, tomorrow I want to change to MySQL or DB2. Sir, compulsory we require to go for new native libraries and so on. Migrating from one database to another database will become very difficult. Have you observed, right? It is a database dependent driver because it internally uses database specific libraries. Hence, migrating from one database to another database will become very difficult. Clear for all of it? Okay, that's all. Next, it is a platform dependent driver because this driver internally uses what? Native libraries. Native libraries are C or C++. C or C++ are platform dependent languages. That's why it is a platform dependent driver. Sir, make sure the worst limitations of type 2 driver is it is the database dependent, platform dependent driver, sir. If you want to change a platform, driver we have to change. If you want to change a database, driver we require to change, sir. Next, we require to install native libraries on the client machine. Regarding we require to install native libraries on the client machine, it's a burden. Next, there is no guarantee every database vendor will provide these drivers. Sir, type 2 driver, if I can ask Oracle people provided type 2, such type of driver is OCA driver, sir, but MySQL people, they didn't provide type 2. If you want to communicate with the MySQL database, compulsory you should go for type 4 driver only. So type 2 support is not available from MySQL database, right? Is it clear? Sir, now Oracle people provided, but MySQL people won't provided, right? Next, note also I provided, sir. The very important point, the only driver out of all the 4 drivers, the only driver which is the platform dependent, database dependent is the type 2 driver which is never recommended to use. Clear for all of it? So this is about, these are various limitations. Because of these limitations, not recommended to use. Even performance wise good, because maintenance wise it's a 2 worst. Change, if you want to change the platform, compulsory required to change the driver. If you want to change the database, compulsory required to change the driver software. It's always a problem. That's why database dependent, platform dependent, which is the very worst. That's why this type of driver never recommended to use. Clear for all of it, okay? That's all. Now in the interview room, if any person is asking, can you please explain about type 2 driver architecture, advantages, limitation, just simply draw this diagram, explain what is the functionality and explain what are the advantages and limitations, right? Clear for all of it, right? That's it. Sir, up to this we covered what is type 2 driver functionality, architecture, next limitations, advantages, like. There is one small component I will discuss. Sir, do you know OCI driver? OCI driver is a type 2 driver provided by Oracle people. Are you getting? What is this one, sir? OCI driver? OCI driver is the type 2 driver provided by Oracle people to communicate with the Oracle database. Remember, sir, now this OCI driver internally uses OCI libraries. Are you getting? Internally OCI driver internal uses what? OCI libraries. So these OCI libraries are nothing but C language functions. Remember, OCI libraries are nothing but internally C language functions. Because sometimes what will happen? Can you give an example for type 2 driver? Type 2 driver. Then you have to talk few minutes about type 2 driver, right? Sir, OCI driver provided by Oracle people. It is a type 2 driver, right? Okay. Next, by using this driver, yes, Java application can communicate with the Oracle database. Clear for all of it, okay? Next, OCI driver and OCI libraries. These two things are available in the jar file form. Okay, remember this one. If you want to use OCI driver, type 2 driver provided by Oracle people, OCI driver and OCI libraries, both are available in the form of jar file. We require to place that jar file in the class path. Don't worry about which jar files are. Once we install Oracle, automatically this jar file is going to come. While explaining the programs, I will take care. Don't worry about that. Sir, which jar files are? Okay, very simple. JDBC 14.jar. What is the jar file name? Can you spell out? JDBC 14.jar. If you are using Oracle 10G, sir, I am using Oracle 10G edition, then which jar file contain OCI driver and the corresponding OCI libraries? Yes, JDBC 14.jar. Sir, I am not using Oracle 10G because it's outdated, sir. I want to use assume Oracle 11G. If you want to use Oracle 11G, then OJDBC 6.jar. Regarding what is the jar file name? Can you spell out? OJDBC 6.jar. Okay, if you are using Oracle 11G, most of our programs, I will explain with respect to this. Compulsory, this jar file you have to be aware. OJDBC 6.jar. Next, OJDBC 7.jar. Okay, if you are using Oracle 12C, sir. Regarding if you are going to use Oracle 12C, which jar file contain OCI driver and the corresponding OCI libraries. Okay, OJDBC 7.jar. Is it clear for all of it? So, if any person is asking, can you give an example for type 2 driver? OCI driver is the type 2 driver provided by Oracle people. OCI driver internally uses OCI libraries to communicate with the database. OCI driver and the corresponding OCI libraries are available in the form of jar file. If you want to use type 2 driver or OCI driver, compulsory we require to set class path. Okay, clear for all of it. Next, what is the jar files we have to place? Based on your Oracle version, you require to use corresponding jar file. OJDBC 14.jar or OJDBC 6.jar or OJDBC 7.jar. But I have one small doubt, sir. What's my doubt is, what is this 14, 6, 7? Is it random numbers? OJDBC 14.jar, OJDBC 6.jar, OJDBC 7, 14, 6, 7, is it random numbers? No, there is some significance there. What is that significance is? OJDBC 14.jar we are using for Oracle 10G. Oracle 10G internally uses Java 1.4 version. Are you getting? Oracle 10G internal uses what? Java 1.4 version. So 1.4, 14. Have you observed, right? 14. Next, Oracle 11G internally uses Java 6 version. Are you getting? What is the version, sir? Java 6. That's why OJDBC 6.jar. Remember. Similarly, OJDBC 7.jar, Oracle 12C internally uses Java 7 version. Is it clear for all of you? But anyway, based on your version, you have to use the corresponding jar file. You have to set this jar file in your class path. Don't worry much technical words. Once our programming is going to start, there I will explain all this nonsense. Clear for all of you? Okay, that's all. So can you give an example for type 2 driver? OCI driver provided by Oracle people to communicate with Oracle database is the type 2 driver, right? Clear, right? Okay, just let me summarize the points whatever I covered, sir. Have a look once. Here, Java application communicates with OCI driver, which is the type 2, internally communicating with OCI libraries, and this one communicate with the Oracle database. Have you observed? So OCI driver converts JDBC calls into OCI library calls. These OCI library calls can be understandable by Oracle database or Oracle database engine. Next, sir, OCI. What is the meaning of OCI, sir? Oracle call interface. Oracle call interface driver is a type 2 driver provided by Oracle. Next, OCI driver internally uses OCI libraries to communicate with the database. Next, OCI libraries contain C language functions. You know, right? Next, OCI driver and the corresponding OCI libraries are available in the following jar file. Sir, hence we have to place this jar file in the class path. Sir, which jar file? If you are using Oracle 10G, OJDBC 14.jar. If you are using Oracle 11G, OJDBC 6.jar. Oracle 12C, OJDBC 7.jar. But why 14, 6, 7? The numbers already I told. Oracle 10G internally uses Java 1.4 version. Oracle 11G internally uses Java 6 version. Oracle 12C internally uses Java 7 version. Clear for all of you? That's all, sir. So if any person is asking, can you please tell, what can you give an example for type 2 driver? Very simple, sir. OCI driver is an example for type 2 driver provided by Oracle people. Then you ask MySQL. For MySQL database, I want to communicate. What is the type 2 driver? MySQL people won't provide a type 2 driver. Type 2 driver is available only for Oracle database. Clear, right? That's all. Sir, up to this we covered how many types of drivers are available. Clear for all of you? Type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4 drivers, right? Now, what is the architecture of type 1 driver? How internally it works? Next, what are various advantages and limitations of type 1 driver? I will discuss, right? So now, this type 1 driver, what is the architecture, sir? Very simple. Just have a look once, sir. This is my Java application. Regarding this is my Java application internally uses JDBC, right? Now here there is a database is there, sir. Assume that this is the database. Regarding, sir, from Java application I want to communicate with the database. Sir, have you remembered, right, some we covered in the last videos? Okay, ODBC drivers are there. In the olden days, the people are going to use via ODBC, they are going to communicate with the database, right? Type 1 driver internally uses ODBC drivers, sir. How it is going to be happen? Very simple. Let me cover here. ODBC driver is there, okay, to communicate with the database. Okay, ODBC driver is there to communicate with the database. Remember this. But now my question is, from Java I want to convert into ODBC calls. if I can able to convert into ODBC calls, ODBC driver can convert ODBC calls into database specific calls. So to convert JDBC calls into ODBC calls, some driver must be required. Correct or not? Okay. That driver is nothing but type 1 driver, right? Are you able to understand? This is the type 1 driver. Now observe, Java application can communicate with the type 1 driver. Type 1 driver communicate with the ODBC driver. ODBC driver communicate with the database. Same way, database will provide results. ODBC driver will provide results to type 1. Type 1 will provide the results to Java application, right? Have you observed, right? Sir, this is type 1 driver. Can you spell out what is the job of this type 1 driver, sir? To convert JDBC calls into ODBC calls, ODBC calls into JDBC calls. Are you getting that? To convert JDBC calls into ODBC calls, and the ODBC driver converts ODBC calls into database specific calls. Have you observed? This driver acts as bridge between our JDBC and ODBC. That's why this driver also known as JDBC ODBC bridge driver. Have you remembered? Somewhere I covered in the last video. JDBC ODBC bridge driver, or simply we can use the word bridge driver, right? Are you getting? So what is the functionality of this type 1 driver, sir? If any person is asking, type 1 driver converts JDBC calls into ODBC calls, ODBC driver converts ODBC calls into database specific calls. Now my database can able to understand. Is it clear, right? Okay, sir, now that is the role of type 1 driver, right? Sir, if you observe that all these things, sir, Java application, type 1 driver, next and after that ODBC driver, all these things should present on client machine. Remember this one, all these things should present on client machine, right? Sir, next, sir, why it is the bridge driver? It's a very clear. Next, who introduced this type 1 driver, sir? Who is responsible to provide? Yes, this driver provided by Sun Microsystems, yeah, the part of JDK, sir. Remember this one, at the part of JDK. Once we install JDK, automatically this driver by default is going to come. We are not required to install separately, right? Are you in a position to understand, right? Okay, sir, who is the responsible to provide type 1 driver, sir? Type 1 driver, who is the responsible? Sun Microsystem, yeah, the part of JDK. We are not required to install anything, right? Can you explain what is the functionality of type 1 driver? Converts JDBC calls into ODBC calls. ODBC driver converts ODBC calls into database specific calls. Internally, type 1 driver uses ODBC driver support. Everyone can able to understand. That's all. This is about a simple architecture of type 1 driver, right? Then for this type 1 driver, what are various advantages are there? What are various limitations are? Just take a bit special care. Now I will explain about advantages, right? Observe that. Simple advantage, just how I told, it is we are not required to install this driver separately because it's going to be, it's available at the part of JDK, right? No separate installation is required. Point number 1, we are not required to install separately, sir. So automatically it is by default available at the part of JDK. Next and after that, it is very easy to use, right? It's very easy to use. That part I will discuss soon. Don't worry about that. Working with the type 1 driver, working with the type 2 driver, like programs I will explain, there you can able to get. It's a very easy to use, right? Okay, so it is the biggest advantage is we are not required to install separately. Next and after that, it's very easy to use. Sir, third important benefit of this type 1 driver, observe that type 1 driver communicate with the database with the help of one ODBC driver. Correct, right? Okay, my type 1 driver never communicates with the database directly. That's why it is the database independent driver. Remember this one, type 1 driver is the database independent driver because it is not communicating with the database. Who is the responsible to communicate with the database, right? ODBC driver is the responsible to communicate with the database. Clear for all of it? That's why migrating from one database to another database is very easy in the case of type 1 driver because it is a database independent driver. Are you getting? Database independent drivers are. Okay, like next, what are various limitations are there? Yes, obviously there are a number of limitations are there for this type 1 driver, right? So just let me summarize what limitations are there. Just observe that, sir. There are several limitations are there, sir. What is the first limitation? Sir, take very special care about this one. What is the first biggest limitation, sir? In the case of type 1, how many conversions are required? Java calls should be converted into ODBC calls. ODBC calls should be converted into database specific calls. Sir, obviously, how many conversions are required, right? 2 conversions are required. Performance is going to be down, sir. Remember this one. Out of all 4 drivers, the slowest driver is a type 1 driver only. It is performance wise not at all up to the mark. That's why it is a slowest driver. Are you getting? Slowest driver. I can use the word, it is also known as snail driver. What is the meaning of snails? Snail means what? Okay, which can move very slowly. I hope you people may aware, right? What is the snail? Just have a look once if you want. Okay, just the basic, at least this diagram you can. Sir, in the Google, just I'm taking snail images like. Have you observed, right? Now this is the snail, sir. Just observe that how they can move snails very slowly they will move, right? Okay, snail. So make sure are you able to get right. So type 1 driver is also known as what? Snail driver. It is the slowest driver among all JDBC drivers, right? Clear, right? Okay, sir, first one because 2 level conversions are required. Second one, sir, have you observed? Type 1 driver internally depends on what? ODBC driver. Type 1 driver internally depends on what? ODBC driver. So ODBC driver concept applicable only for Windows machines. Have you remembered, right? In the last video somewhere I covered ODBC concept applicable only for what? Windows machines. So that's why type 1 driver concept applicable only for Windows machines. Sir, I want to use Linux, I want to use Sun Solaris, then not possible. So platform independent nature we are going to miss because of this ODBC, right? Clear for all of it? That's why, sir, it is platform dependent driver. But this one, sir, it is the platform dependent driver applicable only for Windows machines. Remember that, okay? Sir, this is the second biggest problem, sir. We have to use our Java program only for Windows machine. Then where is the question of our Java platform independent nature we are missing if I use type 1 driver? Have you observed? First biggest problem, performance wise not up to the mark. Second biggest problem, platform dependent driver. It is applicable only for Windows because of internal ODBC driver. There is another reason is there, sir. Another limitation is there. Another very important limitation, right? Who is the responsible to provide type 1 driver? Sun Microsystems. Yeah, the part of JDK. Correct or not? Yeah, the part of Java. Once we install Java software, automatically type 1 driver is coming. Correct, right? But make sure this type 1 driver support available until 1.7 version only. Observe that carefully, sir. This type 1 driver support available until 1.7 version only. From Java 1.8 version onward, no type 1 driver. We have to discuss, we have to update to our friends or to our kids, say, Array, once upon a time there was a king, the king has 7 sons, like we are going to discuss small stories, right? Once upon a time there was a type 1 driver in the 1.7 version, like that we have to discuss, because from 1.8 version version onwards, there is no such type of support for this driver. Remember this. Are you able to understand? So every reason, every limitation is the big reason only. Performance wise not up to the mark, applicable only for Windows machines. Next, no support from 1.8 version onwards. So that's why this type 1 driver not at all recommended to you. It was the history. Once upon a time was available, but not currently. Is it clear, right? So type 1 driver architecture is the very clear for you people, right? Just observe that. Sir, Java application communicate with the type 1 driver, type 1 driver communicate with the ODBC driver, ODBC driver communicate with the database. Okay, so type 1 driver converts JDBC calls into ODBC calls, ODBC driver converts ODBC calls into database specific calls. These are type 1 driver acts as bridge between JDBC and ODBC. That's why type 1 driver is also known as JDBC ODBC bridge driver. Clear for all of it? Or simply which is also known as bridge driver, right? Okay, next who developed this one? Some people provided this type 1 driver at the part of JDK. Clear, right? Okay, next internally type 1 driver takes support of ODBC driver. What are various advantages of type 1 driver, right? The first biggest advantage, we are not required to install separately because it's available at the part of JDK. Next, it's very easy to use and maintain. Next, sir, this is our type 1 driver never communicates with the database directly. It is a database independent driver. Any database dependency is there. Who is going to take care, sir? ODBC driver is going to take care. Remember this one. That's why it is a database independent driver. Migrating from one database to another database will become very easy. Today I am using Oracle, sir. No. I don't want Oracle. I want to use MySQL. Then automatically migration will become very easy because type 1 driver never communicates with the database directly. Clear for all of you, right? Okay, that's all. These are advantages, right? But what are various slowest driver, platform dependent driver, because it is applicable only for Windows machine. Next, this driver is available until 1.7 version only. From 1.8 version onwards, this driver is not available. That's why, so this driver not at all recommended to use. Everyone can able to understand, right? What is type 1? What is the architecture? What is the functionality? What are the advantages? What are the limitations, right? Clear? Sir, up to this, very clear we covered about type 1 driver, right? Sir, what is functionality? What is the architecture? What are various advantages and limitations of type 1 driver? Everything we discussed. Let me review whatever we discussed so that you will get much clarity. Here observe that this is type 1 driver architecture, right? Okay, JDBC application communicates with the type 1 driver. Type 1 driver communicates with the ODBC driver. ODBC driver communicates with the database. Now, sir, this driver also known as, what is the other word, sir? I covered already. JDBC ODBC bridge driver or simply bridge driver. Next, this driver provided by, who provides this driver, sir? Sun Microsystems as the part of JDK. As the part of Java, sir, Sun Microsystems provided. Once we install Java, automatically this driver is going to come. We are not required to install separately. Remember. Next, internally, this driver will take support of ODBC driver to communicate with the database, because type 1 driver internally takes support of ODBC driver to communicate with the database. Okay, next, type 1 driver converts JDBC calls into ODBC calls, and the ODBC driver converts ODBC calls into database specific calls. Have you observed, right? Type 1 driver converts JDBC calls into ODBC calls. ODBC driver converts ODBC calls into database specific calls. Clear, right? Okay. Next, sir, hence type 1 driver acts as bridge between JDBC and ODBC. Have you observed, right? Type 1 driver acts as bridge between JDBC and ODBC, right? So that's why this type 1 driver is also known as JDBC ODBC bridge driver or simply bridge driver, right? Are you in a position to understand, right? Okay, sir, who provides type 1 driver? Sun Microsystems. Internally type 1 driver will take the support of ODBC driver. Type 1 driver converts JDBC calls into ODBC calls. ODBC driver converts ODBC calls into database specific calls. Sir, what are various positives and negatives of type 1 driver, right? Sir, now advantages of type 1, sir. It's very easy to use and maintain. Regarding it's very easy to use and maintain, I will explain how to work with the type 1 driver with the program. Don't worry about that. Next, we are not required to install separately because it's available at the part of JDK only. We are not required to install. Next, type 1 driver won't communicate with the database directly. Sir, who is the responsible to communicate with the database, right? ODBC driver is the responsible to communicate with the database. That's why, sir, type 1 driver is a database independent driver. Migrating from one database to another database will become easy. Have you observed? Type 1 driver won't communicate with the database directly, hence it is a database independent driver. Sir, because of this, migrating from one database to another database will become very easy, right? Clear, right? So these are the advantages related to type 1. Easy to use and maintain, not required to install because it's available as a part of JDK. Next, it never communicate directly with the database. That's why database independent driver. Migrating from one database to another database will become very easy. Okay, that's all. Next, what limitations are there, sir? What are various limitations of type 1? Very dangerous, sir. Sir, first, it is the slowest driver among all drivers. Because the reason is, how many level conversions are required? First, JDBC to ODBC, ODBC to database specific. 2 conversions are required. That's why it is the slowest driver, which is also known as snail driver. I showed already image of snail, right? Okay, sir, it is the slowest driver among all drivers, snail driver, because first it will convert JDBC calls into ODBC calls, and ODBC driver converts ODBC calls into database specific calls. Clear for all of it? So it is the slowest because of 2-level conversions. Okay, next, this driver internally depends on ODBC driver, which will work only on Windows machines. Regarding ODBC driver concept applicable only for what? Windows machines. That's why, sir, it is a platform dependent driver. So tomorrow, if you want to run your application on Linux platform or Sun Solaris platform, sorry boss, this type 1 driver can't work. It is applicable only for Windows machines. Next, last one, no support from JDK 1.8 version onwards. Remember that. Sir, this type 1 driver is available until 1.7 version only. From 1.8 version onwards, no such type of support. It was a history, that's all. Are you getting right? Because of this limitation, it's never recommended to use type 1 driver, right? Because of above limitation, it's not recommended to use type 1 driver. It was a history. That's it. Are you able to understand, right? Sir, if any person is asking in the interview room, can you please explain what is the architecture of type 1 driver, functionality of type 1 driver, next, what are various advantages are there, limitations are there? You should be in a position to give left and right to the interview person. Clear for all of you, right? That's all this is about type 1 driver functionality, right? Hi friends, welcome back. In the last videos, just we had a discussion about what is JDBC, what is the JDBC architecture, next what is the JDBC API, like what are various basic terminology related to JDBC, what is the driver software, what is the statement, like we covered. I hope now the basic terminology about JDBC, it is very clear for you people, right? Okay, sir, now in this video, just I want to talk about the most valuable important question for the interview room. How many types of drivers are available? What is the topic name, sir? Types of drivers. How many types of JDBC drivers are available? Okay, sir, before going, how many types are there? Just let me review what is the purpose of drivers are first, so that you people can aware. Sir, I have Java application is there, sir. Assume that it is a Java application. Are you getting that? I have Java application is there. Now I want to communicate with the database. Sir, assume it is the database. From Java application, if you want to communicate with the database, our Java specific calls we have to convert into database specific calls. Database specific calls we have to convert into Java calls. Are you getting that? Compulsory some translator is required to convert Java calls into database specific calls, database specific calls into Java calls. This translator is nothing but driver software. Have you remembered, right? In the last videos we covered very clearly what is the need of driver software, sir. Sir, to convert Java calls into database specific calls, database specific calls into Java calls, some translator must be required. That translator is nothing but one driver software. Clear for all of you, right? Sir, now my question is, how many types of drivers are available? Okay, like simple answer, sir. How many drivers are available? Sir, very important question for the entire room. Compulsory you people should have clear clarity about this one. How many drivers are available? Yes, 2, 3, 4 or thousands of drivers. Remember that in the market, thousands of drivers are available, sir. Every day to day, new drivers are going to be added. Remember, but all JDBC drivers are divided into 4 types based on the functionality and based on architecture. Remember this one. How the driver internally implemented. What is the architecture it follows. What is the functionality of this internal driver. Okay, like based on the functionality, based on the architecture, all these drivers are divided into how many types, right? 4 types, right? Remember this one. Sir, I will just provide what is the type 1 driver, what is the first driver. Automatically you have to tell the remaining driver names, sir. Remember this one. Sir, what is the first one, sir? What is the first one? Type 1 driver. What is the first category, sir? Type 1 driver is the first category, right? Can you spell out? What is the next one? What is the next one? Type 2 driver. What is the type 2 driver? Similarly, okay, type 3 driver. Type 3 driver. Next, type 4 driver, right? Okay, type 4 driver. So, total JDBC drivers are divided into how many types, right? 4 types of drivers are there. In the interview room, if interview person is asking, how many JDBC drivers are available, then immediately your answer should be 4, right? Sir, what is the first category? Type 1. What is the second one, sir? Type 2. Type 3, type 4. But anyway, for this, based on the functionality, some other names also available, right? Type 1 driver is also known as JDBC, ODBC bridge driver. Are you getting what is the other words? For the type 1, JDBC, ODBC bridge driver, or simply some people may use bridge driver. Remember this one. Simply some people may use one bridge driver, right? Sir, type 2 driver. Type 2 driver is also known as partly Java, okay, partly Java native API driver, sir. Sir, very simple. Native API, partly Java driver. Type 2 driver is also known as what? Native API, partly Java driver, or simply native driver, or simply native driver, sir. This is the second driver is all type 2 driver is also known as. The same way, type 3 driver, sir. Type 3 driver is also known as, okay, all Java net protocol driver. All Java net protocol driver, or network protocol driver, or simply other word we can use middleware driver. What is the other word, sir? Middleware driver, like. So this type 3 driver also known as all Java net protocol driver, or network protocol driver, or simply middleware driver. Sir, same way, type 4 driver. Type 4 driver is also known as pure Java driver. Type 4 driver is also known as pure Java driver, are okay, native protocol driver, native protocol driver are sir simple thin driver, or simple, what is the other word, sir? Thin driver. Okay, remember. But anyway, don't worry about these words. Once I'm introducing the functionality of these drivers, then you can able to understand these parts clearly, right? But just simply remember, sir, how many types of JDBC drivers are there? How many types of JDBC drivers are there, sir? 4 types. What is the first one? Type 1 driver, type 2 driver, type 3 driver, type 4 driver, right? Next, what is the purpose of driver software? To convert Java calls into database specific calls, database specific calls into Java calls. Some translator must be required. That translator is nothing but database driver. Clear, right? So most valuable important question for the entire room. In JDBC, how many types of drivers are available? Immediately the answer should be what? 4 types, right? But there is one small confusion point is there, sir. What is that point here is, observe that. Sir, basically, how many types of drivers are available, sir? 4 drivers, sir. But suddenly, very recently, okay, there is one software company named with Progress Data Direct. What is that company name, sir? Progress Data Direct. This company people are introduced one special third party driver. Sir, that driver they named as type 5 driver. Okay, sir, Progress Data Direct, a third party person introduced one driver. They are telling that it is the type 5 driver. But anyway, as of now, industry, JDBC, not JDBC, industry recognized the driver this. So in the interview room, if an interview person is asking how many types of drivers are available, simply you have to tell only 4 types of drivers only. Type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. Clear for all of it? So make sure you people should aware, sir. Very important interview question we are discussing. In JDBC, what is the purpose of driver? How many types of drivers are there? Okay, to convert Java calls into database specific calls, database specific calls into Java calls, some translator must be required. That translator is nothing but a driver. In JDBC, 4 types of drivers are available based on the functionality and architecture. Type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. Other names are there, don't worry much. While discussing these drivers in detail, then I will repeat once again, right? Are you in a position to understand, right? Just let me review up to this whatever we covered, right? Okay, just have a look once, sir. Listen this one. Sir, while here observe, just I spell out what is the purpose of driver, sir. While communicating with the database, we have to convert Java calls into database specific calls, Java calls into database specific calls, and the database specific calls into Java calls. Okay, for this driver software is required. Are you getting right? To convert Java calls into database specific calls, database specific calls into Java calls, some translator is required. That translator itself is nothing but driver software. Next, in the market, thousands of drivers are available, right? But based on functionality and architecture, all drivers are divided into how many types, right? 4 types only. Remember that's a very, very important question. How many types of drivers are there? What is the purpose of driver software? These 2 things you should aware. Sir, what is the first one? Type 1. Type 3, type 4 driver, right? Okay, there are 4 types of drivers are available. So type 1 driver, also known as JDBC ODBC bridge driver or simply bridge driver, right? Next, type 2 driver, also known as native API partly Java driver or simply native driver. Regarding it is internally some native libraries. I will explain. Sir, that's why native API partly Java driver or native driver. Clear. Next, type 3 driver, also known as all Java. Have you observed, right? It's purely developed in Java only. All Java net protocol driver or network protocol driver, sir. All Java net protocol driver or network protocol driver. This driver internally uses middleware server. That's why it is also known as middleware driver. Everyone can able to understand that, okay? That's all. This is the type 3. Next, type 4 driver, right? Type 4 driver, also known as all Java native protocol driver or pure Java driver or simply thin driver. It is the Oracle specific terminology anyway. It is also known as a thin driver, right? Up to this is the clear, right? So I am repeating multiple times. If any person is asking in the interview room, do you know how many types of JDBC drivers are there? Left and right, there are 4 types of JDBC drivers are available. Type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. If you are interested, you can spell out these words also. Okay, like next and after that, even there is a note also I provided, sir. Observe that Progress Data Direct Software Company introduced type 5 driver. It is not the industry standard driver. Even they introduced it, it's a third party software company, but the industry, sir, standard drivers are 4 only. Sir, they are introducing type 5 driver, but industry not yet recognized one JDBC standard driver. That's all. Are you able to understand basic introduction? What is the driver? How many types of drivers are there? What is the purpose of each driver, right? Okay. If you feel comfortable, in the next I will talk about what is the architecture of type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, type 5. Next, how we can use these drivers for our JDBC programming, I will explain so that you people can get much clarity in the subject. Clear, right? Sir, in the last videos, just we had a discussion about types of drivers. Type 1 driver I completed, type 2 driver completed, right? But anyway, very unfortunate, both the drivers are not recommended to use. What is the biggest problem with the type 1 driver? Have you remembered, right? In the last videos I covered very clearly. What is the problem with the type 1 driver? Type 1 driver, performance wise, not up to the mark. Second problem, what is the second problem? It is internally depends on ODBC driver. That's why which is applicable only for Windows platform. Next, no support from Java 1.8 version onwards. Because of these reasons, type 2 driver, type 1 driver not recommended to use. Clear? Then, what problem with the type 2 driver? Type 2 driver, in the last video I covered. Type 2 driver, the biggest problem, it is a database dependent driver. It is a platform dependent driver. Are you getting? If you want to change the platform, you require to change the driver. If you want to change the database, you require to change the driver. Are you getting? So the worst driver, which is depending on both the platform as well as database, is type 2 driver, right? So because of these reasons, type 1 and type 2 never recommended to use for a long period. Okay. So next I will go for type 3 and type 4 drivers, most commonly used drivers. That's why more concentration must be required about type 3 and type 4 drivers. Make sure you people should be aware. But anyway, in this video, let me talk about type 3 driver. Sir, what is the architecture of this type 3 driver? Just observe that, sir. Type 3 driver. Okay, here it is almost the same as type 1, type 2, architecture wise same, but with a small difference is there. What is the difference is? Just observe that. Here Java application is there. This Java application communicate with the type 1 driver. Type 1 driver communicate with the ODBC driver, which is communicate with the database. Regarding this is architecture related to type 1 driver, right? Similarly, what is the architecture for type 2 driver, sir? Java application. Yes, you have to tell, sir. Java application. Next, type 2 driver. Type 2 driver. Type 2 driver internally uses vendor provided native libraries. Vendor provided native libraries communicated with the database. Are you getting? So type 2 driver converts JDBC calls into native library calls, which can be understandable by database engine. Up to that we covered, right? So type 3 driver is also same as type 2 or type 1 with a small difference, right? What is the difference here is, assume that this is Java application. Are you getting right? What is this one, sir? This is Java application, right? Assume that it is the Java application. This Java application communicates with the type 3 driver. Observe carefully, sir. type 3 driver. Type 3 driver. Type 3 driver internally communicates with the middleware server. Regarding internally communicates middleware server, this middleware server internally communicates with the database. Regarding, so the architecture of type 3 driver is it's almost same as type 1 or type 2. Only difference is ODBC driver or native libraries part replaced with middleware server. Okay, sir, Java application communicates with the type 3. Type 3 driver communicates with the middleware server. Middleware server communicates with the database. Now the results will go back in the same style. Clear, right? Sir, now what is in the case of type 3? Type 3 driver internally uses middleware server to communicate with the database, right? Oh, for type 3 to work with the type 3 compulsory middleware server must be required. We require to install something like IDS. Are you getting that? IDS server. Okay, internet database access server. Okay, something like IDS we require to install. Then type 3 driver can communicate with the database via middleware server, right? Now take a bit special case, sir. This driver, observe very carefully, sir. This type 3 driver internally takes a support of middleware server to communicate with the database. Next, this type 3 driver converts JDBC calls into middleware server specific calls. Middleware server converts that middleware server specific calls into database specific calls. Are you getting that? So here type 3 driver converts JDBC calls into middleware server specific calls. Middleware server converts middleware server specific calls into database specific calls. Are you able to understand, right? Sir, how many conversions are required? 2 conversions. JDBC to middleware server specific call, middleware server specific calls to database calls. 2 conversions are required, right? Sir, this is architecture related to type 3 driver, right? This type 3 driver also known as all Java net protocol driver. Are you getting that? All Java net protocol driver, or sometimes we can use the word network protocol driver. Sometimes we can use the word network protocol driver, or even we can use the word middleware driver. What is the other word, sir? Middleware driver, because internally it uses what? Middleware server. That's why it is also known as middleware driver. Clear for all of you? Sir, if any person is asking, can you please explain architecture and functionality of type 3 driver, then immediately you should be in a position to explain this one, sir. Type 3 driver converts JDBC calls into middleware server specific calls. Middleware server converts that middleware server specific calls into database calls. Something like middleware server acts as a broker to communicate with the database, right? Okay, make sure, sir, in the government offices especially, if you want to do some work, sir, especially we are always going to depend on some agents, are getting that? Some brokers, okay, who are going to take care everything related to that government officer and work. Just we have to contact the broker. Broker is going to take care everything, sir. Most of the times government works are going to be done like that. Okay, out of 100, 99% of the times we have to depend on something like this only, right? Okay, whether you accepted or not. Remember that. So here have you observed, right? This person, he is going to take care database related everything, sir. This person never going to communicate with the database. Who is the responsible to communicate with the database, right? Okay, middleware server is the responsible. Internally, middleware server may use either type 1 or type 2 or type 4 driver to communicate with the database. That thing is going to take care by middleware server. We are not required to worry about that. Everyone can able to understand, right? So, can you explain what is a type 3 driver architecture? Very simple. Java application, type 3 driver, middleware server, and then database. So type 3 driver converts JDBC calls into middleware server specific calls. Middleware server converts middleware server specific calls into database specific calls. Clear for all of you? This is nothing but type 3 driver, right? Then immediately you ask, Sir, what is the advantage of this driver? What is the advantage of this driver? Make sure, sir, the most powerful driver out of all the 4 drivers is a type 3 driver only. In enterprise applications, most commonly used driver is the type 3 driver only, sir. What is the reasons for that? Sir, first reason, listen very, very carefully about this terminology, right? What is the first reason, right? Okay, here just observe, this driver never communicates with the database. Regarding this driver never communicates with the database, correct or not? Sir, who is going to take care about database related? Middleware server. That's why this driver is database independent driver. Sir, what is the first biggest advantage, sir? Database independent driver. Remember this one. Sir, tomorrow if you are going to change your database from Oracle to MySQL to DB2 or DB to Sybase, my driver not required to change. Are you getting it? One driver is enough for all databases. You can use any database, but middleware server is going to take care that the database related changes, but my type 3 driver never going to worry. We are not required to change. So type 3 driver is it database dependent or database independent? Database independent driver. Clear for all of it? Okay, that's next one, sir. There is another biggest advantage, sir. Type 3 driver is fully developed in Java, sir. It's a pure all Java driver. That's why type 3 driver is a platform independent driver, because it is completely developed only in Java, right? That's why it is platform independent driver. You can use any platform, sir. It may be Windows or Linux or Unix or Sun Solar, is no problem. For any platform you can use same type 3 driver only. Clear for all of it? Okay, so it is platform independent driver. Regarding it is the platform independent driver. Make sure, sir. So these 2 reasons are enough to choose this driver, sir. If you are changing your database, if you are changing your platform, we are not required to change our driver. Regarding that, we are not required to change our driver. That's why, sir, I want a single driver which is going to work for all databases, for all platforms. Such type of best driver is nothing but one type 3 driver, right? Clear? Are you able to understand clearly, right? Okay, that's all. Next, sir, even this person is this much strong, still there are some problems are there. Obviously some limitations are there, sir. What those limitations? The first limitations are, have you observed? First, JDBC calls we have to convert into middleware server specific calls. Middleware server converts that middleware server specific calls to database calls. Are you getting database specific calls? How many levels of conversion is required? 2 levels. That's why relatively performance is low because of 2 level conversion. Clear for all of you, right? Sir, relatively performance is down because of performance is low. Relatively performance is low because of 2 level conversion. Clear for all of you, right? Okay, that's all. This is the first problem, right? Sir, no problem, because when compared with these advantages, performance is going to be down. No big issue for us. Okay, second thing, sir, very, very important. Sir, if you want to work with the type 3 driver, compulsory we have to install middleware server or not? Yes, we require to install mandatory middleware server. That's why middleware server we require to install, we have to buy, sir. It is extra cost. Regarding cost of this driver is high when compared with all remaining database drivers. Remember this terminology clearly, right? Regarding, so positives are, observe that positives are 2 positives: database independent driver, platform independent driver. But the negatives are performance is low and the cost is high when compared with all JDBC drivers, because we require to buy middleware server. Clear for all of it, sir? But anyway, by saying these advantages, the people are always going to prefer type 3 driver in our day-to-day enterprise applications, right? Everyone can able to understand. So if a person is asking what is the architecture of type 3 driver, what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, right? Sir, internally type 3 driver take support of middleware server to communicate with the database. First point. Next, this driver type 3 driver converts JDBC calls into middleware server specific calls. Middleware server converts middleware server specific calls into database specific calls. Clear, right? So how many levels of conversion is required? 2 levels of conversion is required. Make sure, sir. Okay. Next, what are advantages of type 3 driver? Biggest advantage, it is the database independent driver, it is the platform independent driver. Sir, you can maintain same driver for a daytime and a night time, whether it is the rain or whether it is not raining. Next, whether it is a city road or village road or highway, for any kind of thing, one driver is enough. Are you getting that? But type 2 driver is the very worst. If you change a database, you require to change the driver. If you change a platform, you require to change the driver. Correct or not? But here, for all platforms, for all databases, only one driver by default is enough. Clear, right? Okay. This is what type 3 driver architecture, right? Can you please give an example for type 3 driver? Example is IDS driver. Can you spell out what is that IDS, sir? Internet Database Access Server. Are you getting it? Is the middleware server. So by using that, happily we can able to communicate with the database. But anyway, I will explain with a small program how to work with this IDS server or type 3 driver with the program. Then you will get much clarity, right? Clear for all of you up to this? Sir, up to this we covered what is type 3 driver, what is the advantage, what is the disadvantage. After completing 2 worst drivers, type 1 and type 2, we cover type 3. Type 3 is the biggest commonly used driver because it is a database independent, platform independent driver. Clear, right? Okay. Sir, now let me talk about a bit in detail, sir. Here just let me summarize whatever I covered up to this theory, sir, into the notes style so that you get much clarity, right? Have a look once. Here, type 3 driver. Are you getting type 3 driver? Java application, type 3 driver. Type 3 driver communicates with the middleware server. Middleware server communicates with the database. Remember, have you observed? Java application, type 3 driver, both are hosted on client machine. Are you getting? Both are there on the client machine. This is the middleware server, different machine. Database obviously may be locating somewhere else. Are you getting? It is the 3-tier architecture, right? Okay, that part I will discuss anyway. Just observe that. Sir, this driver also known as Java Net Protocol driver. Are you getting? Via network, type 3 driver can communicate with the middleware server. That's why Net Protocol driver or Network Protocol driver or simply middleware driver. Okay, these are various other words for type 3 driver, right? Next, type 3 driver converts JDBC calls into middleware server specific calls. Type 3 driver converts JDBC calls into middleware server specific calls. This middleware server converts middleware server specific calls into database specific calls. Have you observed? Type 3 driver convert JDBC calls into middleware server specific calls. Middleware server converts middleware server specific calls into database specific calls. Clear, right? Okay. Next, internally middleware server uses type 1 or type 2 or type 4, type 1 or type 2 or type 4 to communicate with the database, right? Who is going to take care, sir? This middleware server is going to take care. We are not required to worry about that. Next, sir, this is just architecture, whatever related to our, okay, this type 3 driver, right? Very simple, sir. Type 3 driver internally depends on middleware server, which is going to take care communication with the database. Next, type 3 driver converts JDBC calls into middleware server specific calls. Middleware server converts that middleware server specific calls into database specific calls. Clear for all of you, right? Okay, like, sir, for this, what are various advantages? Right, sir, the first biggest advantage is this driver won't communicate directly with the database. Again, won't communicate with the database directly, and hence it is database independent driver. Who is the responsible to communicate with the database? Middleware server is the responsible. We are not responsible. I mean, type 3 driver is not responsible, sir. Have you observed the diagram? Type 3 driver never communicate with the database directly. Who is going to take care of the total communication? Middleware server. That's why type 3 driver is the database independent driver. Whether you are using Oracle, MySQL, Sybase, for anything, this driver is always fixed, sir. The database dependent terminology is going to take care by middleware server. Clear, right? Next, second one, sir. This driver developed completely in Java, fully in Java. That's why I can use the word all Java driver, all Java net protocol driver. All Java means completely in Java. That's why it is a platform independent driver. Sir, you can use any platform, no problem at all. Same driver we can use, whether it is the Windows platform or Linux platform or Sun Solaris, any platform, happily we are allowed to use, right? So it is a platform independent driver. Next, sir, for the type 3, we are not required to have ODBC driver like type 1, vendor specific native libraries like type 2. Have you observed? No need of ODBC driver or vendor specific libraries. Everyone can able to understand, okay? Like, next, limitations, right? What are various limitations are there? Very, very important, sir. I told already just 2 minor limitations are there, sir. One limitation, performance issue, because how many level conversions are there? JDBC to middleware server specific calls, middleware server specific calls to database specific calls. So that's why 2 level conversions are there. Performance is down. Next, we require to purchase or buy, sir, this middleware server. Obviously, sir, the cost of this driver is more when compared with all the remaining drivers. So the costliest driver among all 4 JDBC drivers is type 3 driver only. Have you observed, right? Sir, because of having middleware server in the middle, there may be a chance of performance problems. Problem number 1. Second one, we need to purchase middleware server, and hence the cost of this driver is high when compared with all remaining drivers. Clear for all of you, right? So what are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? Next, what is the functionality of type 3 driver? It is very clear. In the entire room, if entire person is asking, hey, can you please explain type 3 driver architecture, left and right by telling all these things. Clear, right? Last one note I have to cover. What is that is? Can you please give an example for type 3 driver? What is that example, sir? IDS driver. What is that? IDS, Internet Database Access Server. IDS driver. I will how to use this one with program I will explain. Don't worry about that. IDS driver is the type 3 driver. Okay. Next, sir, have you observed? There is one special point is there about this type 3 driver, sir. The only driver which is both platform independent, database independent is a type 3 driver. That's why highly recommended to use in our enterprise application. Tomorrow, if you are changing database, if you are changing platform, we are not required to change our driver software. That's why highly recommended to use type 3 driver, right? Have you observed? The only driver which is both the platform independent and the database independent is type 3 driver. Hence, it is recommended to use. Clear for all of it, okay? That's all, sir. This is what is the architecture diagram, what is functionality. Next, and after that, what are advantages, what are the disadvantages or limitations of type 3 driver? Are you in a position to understand clearly, right? Sir, type 1, type 2. worst drivers not recommended to use. But type 3 and type 4 recommended to use. Type 3 driver, the specialty is database independent, platform independent. For any database, for any platform, one type 3 driver is enough. Internally, the total burden, the total headache is going to take care by which person, sir? Where server. That's all. This is about type 3 driver architecture. Clear, right?